What does it mean when an extraordinary event happens in an ordinary place? Can the architecture hold memory of the event that occurred, or can only the people who endured it? Destruction of architecture can be a form of closure or erasure. The choice of preservation many times is a mode of remembrance, an effort to prevent recurring events. In Canada, from 18 to 1900, the government enforced residential schools. Indigenous children were required to attend regardless of the parents' choice. Here, the children weren't allowed to speak their native language, see their siblings, or their parents. Forced to neglect their own culture, this was a scheme to assimilate the children into Western culture. The children who attended, now adults, began to speak up about their experiences in these schools. The truth was revealed, and the schools began to close. The Mohawk Institute was the longest-running residential school, closing their doors in 1970. It resides in Brantford, Ontario, and is now known as a Woodland Cultural Center. While many residential schools were torn down by the order of the affiliated church or the government, the Six Nations, including Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, fought to preserve the Mohawk Institute to make known what happened to their people. The typology of the residential school was similar to institutions such as orphanages and boarding schools. When a child was enrolled, they were assigned a new number, in which many cases became their new name. Their hair would be cut, then they would be washed, and then sent to the playroom with the other children. The students and the building were divided by gender, having different dormitories, dining areas, classrooms, playrooms, and labor. Additionally, siblings would be separated in efforts to stop them from conversing. Dormitories had an open floor plan. This allowed for good ventilation but also supported surveillance. They had additional partitions to divide sleeping spaces and blocked views between groups of students. Rows upon rows of beds fill the room. The space per child reveals these schools' intentions were not to teach, but rather become a warehouse. The average square foot per child was smaller than that of the average prison cell. Many residential schools had no spaces of privacy for the children. There was always a method of surveillance. In some schools, they even had windows built into the walls of the restrooms and dormitories to watch for misconduct and make sure they weren't performing sin. Areas of the school out of view were off limits to the children. The laundry rooms were often overly equipped for the school's laundry alone. People neighboring the school would hire the students to do their laundry. The girls were put to do the labor, and the funds were largely not reinvested towards the children. It is in these loud rooms where acts of SA were done to the children when the loud machinery could mask the sounds. Boys were put to do outdoor labor such as keeping the acres and acres of grass. There were stories that the boys were put to fight by the staff as a form of entertainment. For the boys who win, they get extra perks, like a little less work or a little more food. Who is a witness to this history? Is it the children alone, or could it be the walls and the doors? What about the trees and the wind? The ecology remained constant, and it was there to see the change.